I experienced Norwegian Cruise Line's premium ship-within-a-ship concept called the Haven for the first time on the Joy this past August. In addition to upgraded cabins, the Haven features a private lounge, restaurant, pool, and sun deck. Since the Haven costs 4 to 5 times what you pay for a regular cabin, I had high expectations. Were they met? For the most part, yes, but with a few big disappointments. So is the Haven worth the extra cost? Find out in this episode of The Chill Cruiser, where I'll share a full review of my Haven experience. Hey cruisers, Andrew from Ottawa, Canada here. Welcome to The Chill Cruiser, where I review premium cruise ships from a chill perspective, sharing tips on how to save time, money, and grief on your cruise vacations. Today I'm going to share a full review of my Haven experience on Norwegian Joy sailing to Bermuda from New York this past August. For a detailed rundown of the main areas of the ship and the updates coming in this winter's dry dock, check out my full review in the description. The Joy has a lot to offer, but the one major downside is that it can feel very crowded, especially when it's sailing over capacity with 4,600 people like on my cruise. This was my first time sailing on the Haven thanks to my friend's casino discount. I've sailed several times on Norwegian ships in a regular cabin, and the Haven always had a mystique about it since there are so many private spaces that you can only see or access when you have a Haven cabin. Based on word of mouth and the fact that prices started around $4,500 Canadian per person for an entry-level suite on a 7-day cruise, I had very high expectations. For the most part, the Haven did meet those expectations, but with a few big disappointments in some key areas. There were originally about 80 Haven suites on the Joy, but when the ship was repurposed in 2019, they upgraded several regular suites to Haven suites without expanding any of the Haven common areas. There will be even more people in the Haven areas after the ship's January 2024 dry dock, when the 2 premier owner suites get updated to include 3 bedrooms and 3.5 bathrooms. Since the Haven concept really is a ship within a ship, I'm going to revisit all of the categories from my main review from a Haven perspective, starting with access. At the New York terminal, there was a dedicated Haven check-in area and lounge. These perks can save you a lot of stress when the terminal is really busy, like on our last Norwegian cruise out of Port Canaveral, where we waited close to 2 hours in a line that stretched into the parking lot to check in. The New York terminal was very well designed and staffed, so there were minimal lineups regardless of cabin category. One of the Haven perks after checking in is that you get escorted onto the ship by a member of the crew who takes you to an elevator reserved for Haven guests to whisk you up to the main Haven facilities on deck 17, which is cool. Haven staff also have access to a crew elevator that they use throughout the cruise to escort guests to the theater, to and from the gangway at ports, and to disembark from the ship, which came in handy because the ship's main elevators were very crowded most of the cruise, especially on disembarkation day. I rated access a low 2 stars for the main part of the ship, but would rate the access perks of the Haven 5 out of 5 stars. Moving on to the vibe of the Haven. All of the exclusive Haven facilities are spread over 3 decks towards the front of the ship, starting with the main lounge that you can access through a nondescript door by the forward elevator bay. All of the Haven spaces felt like a private club except for the main entrance area. Once you go through that door, you walk down a long, narrow hallway that often felt crowded since the Haven was also over capacity with 3 or more people in every cabin. You can usually tell a lot about a ship by checking out their public bathrooms, but the Haven's bathrooms were obviously an afterthought. They're crammed into that narrow hallway and weren't even as nice as the restrooms available to everyone on cruise lines like Celebrity, which are usually beautiful and feature cloth towels, 2 elements missing from the Haven. Since all of the Haven facilities are spread out over 3 decks, and you need to go through the pool area to access spaces like the observation lounge, it can take a few days to get oriented and find everything. Unfortunately, not all Haven rooms are located within the Haven complex. Our cabin was one of the rooms that was recategorized from a regular suite, so it was 2 decks directly below on deck 15. I would rate Vibe 3 out of 5 stars. Speaking of cabins, we were in a penthouse suite with balcony, which was very spacious and comfortable. It included a walk-in closet that my friend appreciated very much, a counter that spanned the length of the room with tons more storage, as well as an espresso machine and various glassware. There was also a small dining table that came in handy for room service. The king-size bed was one of the most comfortable beds I've slept in, but the pull-out couch was by far the least comfortable. Since this was a recategorized room, there were 2 balconies separated by a bulkhead. The bathroom was a bit small and underwhelming for a suite, with a small tub, a regular shower head, and upgraded toiletries. Haven rooms include a private butler who mainly delivered and set up room service orders, as well as daily afternoon snacks. If you'd like a detailed tour of the room, hit subscribe and watch out for my next video. I would rate the cabin 4 out of 5 stars. Speaking of food, room service was excellent. You can choose from an expansive menu with a lot of very tasty options. We ordered several times for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and it was always very good. Breakfast was always impressive with white linen table service and once even a French press for coffee. I highly recommend the French toast. The Haven's restaurant was also very good with a beautiful terrace that was a treat to be on, especially at sunset. We really enjoyed all the meals we tried and the service was always very good. They even prepare beef tartare right at your table. The only downside is that the breakfast, lunch, and dinner menus don't change throughout the cruise. But since the Haven was over capacity, the hosts regularly offered the option to dine at one of the specialty restaurants for free to avoid crowding in the dining room. That's how we discovered the barbecue restaurant, which we enjoyed complete with live country music from a great husband and wife band called the Niley Rich Duo. You can check out the Haven restaurant and room service menus on my blog. I would rate the Haven's food 4 out of 5 stars. Moving on to drinks. The Haven Lounge has a small bar with some very friendly and talented bartenders and mixologists. Their specialty seemed to be the old-fashioned, which they were making all the time. They had a very large assortment of bitters available and offered most of the more than 40 wines available by the glass in the main dining rooms. This is the only bar in all 3 decks of the Haven, so it's also a service bar for the sun deck and the restaurant, keeping it very busy most of the time. I would rate drinks 4 out of 5 stars. Let's talk about the Haven's amenities, starting with indoor options. There are lots of spaces throughout the Haven area to relax, including a beautiful observation lounge with a stunning view and a nice selection of snacks available throughout the day. The 2-story solarium area has a small pool and hot tub and lots of loungers to relax. They did open the roof most days, but because the ceiling is so high up, it always felt like you were indoors. There were a lot more kids than I was expecting. The pool was so small and narrow, it seemed more appropriate for kids than adults. We tried it once and still preferred the larger main adult pool, so we usually went there for a swim later in the afternoon when it was less crowded. There's a sun deck with 2 hot tubs at the very front of deck 19 that was a great place for sail away, especially as we sailed out of New York City under the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. I was expecting there to be a lot of seating options, but on sea days you were lucky to find anything. There also wasn't a lot of shade available. During the day there were servers offering drinks and a small lunch menu. Again, because of the price point and the word of mouth, I had really high expectations here. In premium sun decks on other cruise ships, attendants offer an over-the-top experience with misters, icy treats, and cold towels, and there was none of that on offer here. Compared to the crowded main pool area, it's a big improvement, but it's not enough to justify the cost in my opinion, especially since it doesn't have a pool, and you can get the same experience for a lot less money at the Vibe Beach Club. I would rate amenities 3 out of 5 stars. The last category is service, which was what you would expect at the restaurant and the bar, but there were a few times when I was really disappointed in other areas. The first was with housekeeping. I'm 6'4", so I usually have to request a larger robe, which every other cruise line has never had an issue with providing until now. I asked our stateroom attendant on the first day and never heard back. After the second or third day I asked again, and they said the head of housekeeping was looking into it, but I still never heard back. In a regular cabin, I would have been fine with that, but not in the Haven, where you expect an added level of service. The Haven concierge desk was also overwhelmed the first couple of days with a lineup of people waiting to get help, which was surprising. After we left Bermuda and were going to be at sea for a day and a half, my friend was notified about a very serious family emergency and urgently needed to get off the ship and get home. I asked the concierge what her options were to get home, and they said she could make a free phone call, and that's about it until we got to New York. There was a 24 period where my friend was dealing with matters of life and death with a close family member, which was a very difficult time. No one from the Haven ever reached out the rest of the cruise to check in and see how my friend was doing, and if there's anything they could do to help while she was still on the ship. I thought that's what happens when you're in a luxury hotel, but apparently not in the Haven. Luckily, by the time we did reach New York, my friend's family member had recovered, and she was able to visit them at the hospital. With all of that in mind, I'll rate service 3 out of 5 stars. Overall, I'm glad I tried the Haven, but I don't think I would pay the premium to do it again. The cabin and dining experience are impressive, but the dedicated amenities and concierge service were disappointing. A lot of people I met said they booked the Haven to escape the crowds, which I thought was interesting. Norwegian has done a great job of making outdoor public areas so crowded that people are willing to pay a lot of money to escape them. If you're looking for a premium experience with less crowded options for a fraction of the price of the Haven, I would look at lines like Royal Caribbean or Celebrity. The price point of the Haven is often the same as the suite section of premium lines like Celebrity, and their suite sun decks are much roomier and more luxurious, often with a bar, a pool, and a dining area. And the dinner menus in their suite restaurant change every day. For a detailed look at the experience in all the public areas of the Joy, you can check out my full review here. Thank you for watching, and happy cruising.